For nearly 8 decades, aviation fans, historians, and veteran pilots have debated the same question. Among all piston-engine fighters of the Second World War, which machine truly held the crown for top speed? Today, we're putting that argument to rest using only verified data. Measured level flight speeds taken from official test programs, wartime evaluations, and documented performance trials. What follows is a list of 8 propeller-driven fighters that actually flew and reached the extreme limits of piston-engine technology. These aircraft were not fantasy blueprints or prototypes that barely left the ground. Every fighter here rolled off production lines, and many met the harsh reality of combat. Their astonishing speeds came from relentless engineering, urgent wartime breakthroughs, and the escalating pressure to outpace the enemy in one of humanity's most destructive chapters. We'll start at number 8 and work our way to the fastest piston fighter that dominated the skies by 1945. In 8th place is Germany's Focke-Wulf FW-190D9, capable of reaching roughly 426 miles per hour. Nicknamed the long-nose version, it marked a major shift from the earlier radial engine models that had challenged Allied fighters since 1941. Engineers replaced the round engine with a Junkers Jumo inline power plant, giving the aircraft its stretched profile and dramatically improving performance at high altitude. Production began in August 1944, and more than 700 rolled out before the conflict's final collapse. Pilots in the Luftwaffe appreciated its ability to climb, maneuver, and strike at heights where older versions struggled. Even as Germany's situation deteriorated, the D9 remained one of the most capable fighters in its arsenal. At number 7 we have Britain's Hawker Tempest Mark V, reaching about 435 miles per hour. Conceived as a more refined successor to the Typhoon, it introduced a sleeker wing and the powerful Napier Sabre engine, turning it into a devastating low-altitude performer. When it entered service in the spring of 1944, it immediately became the Royal Air Force's best answer to the V-1 flying bombs. Its sheer speed allowed pilots to chase the pilotless weapons in level flight, shoot them down, or even nudge them off balance using their wingtips. In air-to-air combat, the Tempest was equally formidable. Its mix of speed, firepower, and responsive controls made it one of the RAF's most feared fighters. During the Allied campaign across Europe, it racked up impressive results and earned a reputation as one of Britain's greatest piston-engine aircraft. Our 6th spot belongs to the Supermarine Spitfire Mark XIV, which topped out at roughly 446 miles per hour. Although it carried the famous Spitfire name, the Mark XIV was a completely different beast from the early fighters of 1940. The key difference lay in the Rolls-Royce Griffon engine, delivering more than 2,000 horsepower, twice the strength of the early Merlin engines. To tame all that power, the airframe needed reinforcing, and the tail surfaces grew larger to keep the aircraft stable. The payoff was enormous. This Spitfire climbed faster, accelerated harder, and fought effectively at altitudes where earlier variants fell behind. Entering squadron service in early 1944, more than 900 were eventually built, and they quickly earned respect by intercepting high-flying reconnaissance aircraft and even the new enemy jet designs. Before we enter the top 5, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and which fighter you think deserves the number 1 position. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into aviation history, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Taking 5th place is America's Grumman F-8F Bearcat, capable of around 455 miles per hour. Designed as the ultimate lightweight carrier-based fighter, it began with the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine and wrapped it in the smallest airframe engineers could safely build. The result was astonishing. The Bearcat could shoot up to 10,000 feet in under 2 minutes, faster than any American fighter of its era. It rolled sharply, responded instantly, and carried either 4 20mm cannons or 6 50 caliber machine guns despite its compact size. Unfortunately for its wartime potential, the Bearcat arrived in frontline units only in February 1945. Barely 24 were in operational service when the fighting stopped. Still, test pilots praised it as one of the best-handling piston fighters ever created, and in the post-war era it became the aircraft of choice for the Blue Angels, breaking several climb records. In fourth place sits Germany's Focke-Wulf TA-152H, which reached approximately 469 miles per hour. Built specifically to engage Allied bombers and escorts operating above 30,000 feet, it featured long wings, a pressurized cockpit, and a Jumo engine with an advanced two-stage supercharger. These upgrades gave it remarkable performance above 40,000 feet, an altitude where many Allied fighters struggled simply to stay airborne. But timing worked against it. Production began in November 1944, and perhaps 150 examples left the factories. Only a handful ever reached squadrons, and even fewer experienced combat. Those that did, however, shocked Allied pilots. In one famous encounter in April 1945, a TA-152H pilot engaged 4 P-51 Mustangs at high altitude, downed 2, damaged another, and escaped, proof of what the aircraft could do under the right circumstances. The TA-152 became a symbol of late-war German engineering brilliance, arriving far too late to make a real difference. Finally, number 3 on our list is the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt, capable of around 472 miles per hour. This special high-speed version of the iconic Jug was created for a single mission: chase down and destroy fast enemy fighters and the new jet-powered aircraft emerging over Europe in the final year of the war. It carried a highly tuned Pratt & Whitney engine, an upgraded turbocharging system, and several weight-reducing modifications, turning an already formidable aircraft into a high-altitude interceptor with eye-opening acceleration. Only about 130 were built, entering service with the legendary 56th Fighter Group in late 1944. Although the engine initially proved temperamental, once its issues were solved, the P-47M delivered a combination rare among piston fighters: tremendous durability paired with blistering top speed. It pushed the Thunderbolt design to its absolute limit. In second place stands one of the most unconventional aircraft ever to emerge from wartime Germany, the Dornier Du 335, often called the Arrow. It reached an astonishing 474 miles per hour, a speed rivaling early jet designs. Nothing else in the Second World War looked or flew quite like it. What made the Arrow so unusual was its radical push-pull engine arrangement. Instead of placing engines under the wings or clustering them in one location, Dornier mounted a Daimler-Benz engine at the nose and another directly behind the cockpit, each driving its own propeller, one pulling, the other pushing. This configuration dramatically reduced drag while doubling available power. The result was extraordinary. The Arrow delivered straight-line speed that surpassed nearly every piston-engine aircraft of the era, combined with armor, firepower, and stability that would have made it a terrifying combat opponent. Yet, like many late-war German innovations, it arrived far too late to alter the course of the conflict. Development stalled for years under bureaucratic delays and shifting priorities. The first prototype did not take flight until the autumn of 1943, and the first production machines only reached evaluation units in the early months of 1945. By then, Germany's industrial base was collapsing. Fuel was scarce, factories were bombed, and trained pilots were in short supply. As a result, perhaps only 36 completed aircraft ever left the assembly line. None entered real combat. But the high-speed trials conducted by German test pilots, and later by Allied airmen who flew captured examples, consistently praised the aircraft. Many described it as one of the finest piston-engine fighters they had ever handled. Had the Arrow arrived even 2 years earlier, it might have reshaped high-speed air combat. And now, taking the #1 position as the fastest propeller-driven fighter of the Second World War, we reach the North American P-51H Mustang, a machine that topped out at an incredible 487 miles per hour. This was not a minor upgrade of the famous Mustang that escorted bombers across Europe. The H model was a fundamentally re-engineered aircraft, a lighter, sleeker, more powerful evolution built for raw performance. Engineers trimmed nearly 1,500 pounds from the airframe through redesigned structures and the removal of excess equipment, then fitted it with a Packard-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin, complete with water injection for emergency power bursts. The transformation was dramatic. The P-51H accelerated faster, rolled quicker, and climbed harder than any previous Mustang. Test pilots consistently described it as the most responsive and best-handling Mustang ever built. And despite its incredible speed, it still carried the hallmark of the P-51 family, long-range endurance. On internal fuel alone, it could travel more than 850 miles, enough to escort bombers deep into enemy territory. Production began in February 1945. By the time Japan capitulated 6 months later, more than 550 examples had been delivered. A few reached the Pacific, but none saw live combat before the war ended. Yet the P-51H stands as the ultimate expression of what was possible with a piston engine and a propeller. It was the final summit of an entire era of aviation. These 8 aircraft, spanning multiple nations, designs, and philosophies, represent the extreme limits of piston engine technology. They were born from a period when nations poured limitless resources into gaining a fleeting advantage in the skies. Every improvement, every extra mile per hour, came from thousands of hours of testing, re-engineering, and wartime urgency. What is remarkable is how close the competition truly was. Just over 60 miles per hour separated the 8th fastest fighter from the first. In an air battle where seconds determined survival, that margin mattered. Of course, speed alone didn't decide victory. Maneuverability, firepower, strategy, range, and pilot skill all shaped the outcome of the war. Still, when a pilot needed to outrun danger, catch a bomber, or escape impossible odds, speed was the trump card. Now you've seen the 8 fastest piston engine fighters ever to fly in World War II, ranked by verifiable performance data. Think another machine deserved a spot? Or believe a different aircraft should hold the crown?